Young and the Restless spoilers next week 3/3-7/2025 reveals a terrible storm has hit the Newman family when Sharon Newman, an important woman in Nick's life, suddenly disappeared along with Phyllis Summers. Both women, while being held in an old psychiatric ward in a secret location, encountered a strange kidnapper. Neither Sharon nor Phyllis knew the purpose of this person, but what was happening was not just a normal disappearance, but seemed to be a complex conspiracy behind it. Victor Newman, as always, never ignores a serious problem that could threaten his family. Especially with Sharon, a woman who is not only his son's ex-wife, but also someone who has caused a lot of trouble in the Newman family. However, Sharon's disappearance worries Victor not only because of the trouble she may cause, but also because he knows Sharon's mental health well. Although he knows that Sharon has always faced difficulties in her personal and psychological life, Victor still feels that this may be related to something more dangerous, threatening not only the peace of the family but also the life of his son. As a father who is concerned for his son, Victor cannot remain silent. He decides to go to Nick to give him a warning, even though Nick is ready to face the challenges without his father's advice. Victor and the warning. Nick, you can't continue to be so blind, Victor says in a worried voice as he sits across from his son in the living room of the Newman mansion. Sharon is not who you think she is. She has too many secrets that you have never understood. And now, what's happening, is more than just a missing person. Nick, who had always had a complicated relationship with Sharon, was ready to confront his father's warnings. Although he didn't want to admit it, Nick knew that Sharon might not be who he thought she was. However, their relationship had been too close, and Nick couldn't just give up when Sharon was in danger. You can't understand. This is Sharon, the person I love, the person I've been through so much with. I can't stand by and watch her get hurt and do nothing, Nick replied, determination in his eyes. Victor sighed, feeling helpless that his son wouldn't listen. Nick, don't you see? Sharon has always had a history of mistakes and troubles. You're making the same mistakes. I just want you to realize that your insistence could put you in danger. Despite Victor's convincing warnings, Nick still couldn't give up on trying to rescue Sharon. Part of him felt that if he didn't do anything, he would always feel guilty. His feelings for Sharon, despite their complications, were still an important part of his life. Nick and his decision ever since he learned of Sharon's disappearance, Nick couldn't stop thinking about what could have happened to her. Every time he thought about the dangers she could have faced in her unconscious state, he felt even more tormented. Despite Victor's warnings, Nick decided to continue his journey to find Sharon, not only because of his love, but also because of his sense of responsibility and protection for her. This doesn't mean that Nick didn't listen to his father, but he knew that in a world full of secrets and intrigue, he needed to face the challenges on his own, despite his father's disapproval. Sharon is the son he has loved for a long time, and helping her is something he feels compelled to do. Although it is not easy, Nick begins to make detailed plans to find Sharon and Phyllis. He contacts partners and friends to search for clues, while trying to avoid his father's advice. With the belief that he can protect Sharon, Nick embarks on this challenging journey. Victor's warning about Sharon is only part of the story, and Nick will face difficult choices throughout the search. The feelings between them are not only anxiety, but also deep feelings that Nick cannot easily ignore. While Victor fears that Nick will pay the price for his decisions, Nick believes in his abilities and his love for Sharon. However, the truth about Sharon may change everything. Sharon's disappearance is just the beginning of a complex chain of events that will shake up not only the Newman family, but also force them to confront difficult truths. Can Nick save Sharon, or will he face the consequences that Victor has warned him about? The relationship between father and son will be tested even more severely, as both have reasons to protect those they love. Once again, two women with troubled pasts, Phyllis Summers and Sharon Newman, are drawn into a dangerous game that they cannot control. Both are imprisoned in a dark, mysterious room, where they must not only face the threat of a dangerous kidnapper, but also confront secrets from their own pasts. However, in this predicament, life and death are not the only threats. Their reconciliation, something that no one in the Newman family or their friends could have imagined, becomes the defining story not only of their lives, but also the future of the Newman family relationship. Escape from hell. Sharon and Phyllis do not know who their kidnapper is. All they know is that they are being held in a dark area that appears to be an old psychiatric ward or a long-abandoned medical facility. The old walls not only create a creepy space, but also seem to remind Sharon and Phyllis of their past, the indelible wounds from broken relationships. However, in this desperate situation, both of them clearly realize that they need to work together to find a way to escape. Although their past is full of conflicts and broken relationships, at this moment, they have no choice but to cooperate to survive. Phyllis, with her strong personality and determination to never give up, is the first to discover a gap in the room, a small escape route that the two can use to find freedom. Sharon, although worried about the lurking danger, has an unexpected mental strength when she realizes that they cannot let their past enemies continue to divide them. Both women begin to meticulously plan to break through the protective system around them. Phyllis uses her intelligence to find weaknesses in the facility, while Sharon begins to dig deeper into clues that may explain the kidnapper's motives. However, things are not easy. Both know that they are not only facing a ruthless enemy, but also emotions that they have suppressed for years. A complicated relationship. Sharon and Phyllis's relationship has never been simple. Their fights, betrayals, and constant arguments have become an integral part of their lives. Phyllis has challenged Sharon in love and work, while Sharon has often tormented Phyllis for her poor decisions and actions. They were sworn enemies, and facing death together under these circumstances is truly incredible. But in this situation, it is undeniable that their cooperation seems to be a prerequisite for both of them to survive. Sharon gradually realizes that Phyllis, although strong and sometimes annoying, is actually a woman with just as much ability and determination as she is. The two begin to see each other in a different light, and the psychological barriers gradually begin to dissolve. Phyllis, instead of remaining skeptical, begins to open up to Sharon, realizing that in this life-or-death situation, they need to trust each other. The search never ends. Meanwhile, out there, Nick Newman, the man who has always been worried about Sharon, cannot sit still when he receives news of her and Phyllis's disappearance. Victor's worries about Nick's safety become a reality. Despite his father's warnings, Nick cannot ignore the dangerous situation Sharon and Phyllis face. He is determined to find them, no matter the danger. And while Nick's search is progressing, he has no idea that a terrible disaster awaits him. As Nick approaches the area where Sharon and Phyllis are being held, he encounters a hitman hired to prevent people from approaching the prison. The intense struggle between Nick and the hitman is fierce. Although Nick tries his best to fight, he is severely injured in the confrontation and cannot continue. His situation becomes very critical, and all hope for Sharon and Phyllis depends on Nick's survival. As Sharon and Phyllis get closer to escaping, they also realize that if they are to truly escape this danger, their relationship will never be the same. The arguments and conflicts of the past no longer seem important, and both begin to understand that their unity is the key to their survival. They begin to see each other's strength, and gradually, reconciliation between these two women is no longer impossible. When Sharon and Phyllis finally escape the mysterious room and find help, they realize that their survival is not only a victory over their captors, but also over themselves and their troubled pasts. And when Nick, mortally wounded, finds them and is healed, Sharon and Phyllis understand that their relationship has changed forever. The reconciliation between Sharon and Phyllis is not only a miracle of friendship, but also something the Newman family, who love them, never imagined would happen. In a dramatic and suspenseful turn of events, Phyllis Summers and Sharon Newman, two women who were once sworn enemies, are suddenly drawn into a dangerous situation they cannot control. Imprisoned in a mysterious room, the two women must not only face the threat of their captors, but also confront their own painful pasts. The puzzle surrounding the relationship between Phyllis and Sharon will gradually be revealed, and everything will change after an unexpected escape that no one could have imagined. The mysterious disappearance of Sharon and Phyllis. The story begins when Sharon Newman and Phyllis Summers suddenly disappear without a trace. No one can understand what is happening, and their family, especially Nick, cannot bear the anxiety. It is known that they are imprisoned in a remote area, possibly an abandoned medical facility, where the cold walls seem to imprison not only their bodies but also their minds. Sharon and Phyllis do not know who their kidnappers are, but they both realize that this is not a normal kidnapping. It is a deliberate event and brings back many haunting memories of their past. Sharon, who had experienced many mental shocks, began to fear for her and Phyllis's lives. They both knew that the kidnappers were not only targeting them because of their connection to each other, but also had some deeper reason that they could not understand. Although there was no concrete evidence, Sharon and Phyllis felt that the purpose of this kidnapping was to close the never-ending feud between them. The battles and struggles of the past seemed to no longer be important, when they realized that survival and escape were the only things that mattered now. Unexpected cooperation with determination and unable to bear the fear any longer, Phyllis and Sharon began to work together to find a way to escape from the prison cell. The memories of the past, the fierce conflicts between them, seemed to be no obstacle to this cooperation. Phyllis, always strong and quick to react, begins to lead Sharon to learn about the weaknesses in the prison. Although Sharon sometimes hesitates because of her conflicts with Phyllis, she gradually realizes that only unity can help them survive. This situation is not simply about finding a way to escape a kidnapper, but also an opportunity for Sharon and Phyllis to face their past. Sharon used to be a forgiving person, but her relationship with Phyllis has been damaged many times. This time, in difficult circumstances, Sharon begins to feel the need for Phyllis in this battle for survival. Gradually, the strong walls in Sharon's heart begin to break down, and she realizes that Phyllis, despite her shortcomings, is someone she can trust at this time. Phyllis, with her straightforward nature and unyielding determination, no longer hesitates to come up with bold plans to help the two escape this dangerous situation. Their relationship has always been defined by rivalry since the beginning, but now, they need to overcome their egos to survive. While Phyllis and Sharon work together, another complicated relationship is forming in Nick Newman's heart. He cannot sit still when he receives news of Sharon's disappearance. Feelings of anxiety, fear, and helplessness gradually take over Nick's mind as he realizes that Sharon is in danger. Although the arguments with Sharon and the conflicts of the past are still fresh in his mind, Nick cannot ignore the fact that she is an important person in his life. Despite Victor's warnings that Sharon can cause a lot of trouble for the Newman family, Nick still decides to find Sharon. Determined to protect her, Nick searches and scoured every place he thinks Sharon might be held. But as he nears the area where Sharon and Phyllis are held, something terrible happens. He comes face to face with a hitman who has been hired to thwart any attempt to rescue Sharon and Phyllis. The fight between Nick and the assassin was intense and brutal. Although Nick was strong and determined, he could not fight against an enemy with good fighting skills and a physical advantage. The fight became extremely fierce, and after a strong collision, Nick was seriously injured. Blood was flowing, in pain, but he still persevered. In a coma, Nick knew that he needed to continue fighting to save Sharon, whom he still had deep feelings for. While Nick lay on the ground, seriously injured, Sharon and Phyllis finally found a way out. They ran outside, approaching the place where Nick was in danger. But before they could react, Phyllis noticed that Nick was lying motionless, and with urgency, both rushed to help him. Both Sharon and Phyllis, no matter how many conflicts they had in the past, at this moment no longer thought about their differences. Together, they took care of Nick, trying to find a way to save him in his time of need. When Nick wakes up in the hospital, something miraculous has happened. Not only is his survival, but also a change in the relationship between Phyllis and Sharon. Not only do they escape death, but they begin to see each other in a different light. The feud between them no longer seems important, replaced by sympathy and friendship between two women who were once enemies. This reconciliation is a miracle, not only for Sharon and Phyllis, but also for their loved ones. Once again, The Young and the Restless proves that complicated and painful relationships don't always end in divorce, but can start a new chapter filled with hope and love. In a dramatic and tense twist, Victor Newman sees the recklessness of his son, Nick, when he decides to take it upon himself to rescue Sharon and Phyllis, two women who have been kidnapped in a mysterious room. Although Victor understands Nick's courage and love for Sharon, he cannot sit idly by as his son risks his life without control. This story is not only about rescuing captives, but also a major turning point in the relationship between Nick, Sharon, Phyllis, and the entire Newman family. The mysterious curtain and Nick's risky decision. The story begins when Sharon Newman and Phyllis Summers suddenly and mysteriously disappear. No one knows where they are, and all efforts to find them seem to be fruitless. Nick, who has always had deep feelings for Sharon, cannot bear her disappearance. After days of anxiety and no clues, Nick receives a message from the kidnapper, informing him of the whereabouts of Sharon and Phyllis. Although Nick believes this is the only chance to save them, he cannot help but feel anxious. But what made him impatient was the sense of responsibility and love he had for Sharon. He decided to act immediately, without thinking too much about the consequences. Victor, a father who was always worried about his son's safety, could not help but feel worried when Nick revealed his rescue plan. He could not believe that his son would decide to confront the kidnappers without proper preparation, while the threat from the enemy was still very vague and dangerous. Victor feared that Nick's hasty actions could lead to wrong decisions, even his death. Although he tried to dissuade him, Victor could not stop Nick's determination. In his heart, his worry about his son increased when he saw that Nick did not listen to him. Nick and the risky rescue plan. However, Nick could not be persuaded to give up his decision. He believed that Sharon was in danger and could not wait any longer. With a risky plan and no preparation, Nick embarks on a tense rescue. He does not hesitate to face the potential dangers, despite Victor's warnings. Things happen quickly, and Nick begins to approach the area where Sharon and Phyllis are being held. However, as he gets closer, the inevitable happens. Nick encounters an assassin, who was hired to prevent anyone from trying to rescue Sharon and Phyllis. The fight is fierce, with a difference in strength and combat experience. While Nick does not falter, he is severely injured after a powerful blow from the assassin. Bleeding profusely, Nick barely has enough strength to continue fighting. However, his determination and love for Sharon still keep him from giving up. With all his remaining strength, Nick tries to find Sharon and Phyllis, but he is paralyzed by serious injuries. Meanwhile, Sharon and Phyllis, despite being held captive in a locked room, continue to try to escape. Both women realize that the kidnapper seems to have a direct connection to them. Sharon and Phyllis do not know the kidnapper's exact motives, but they are certain that this kidnapping is aimed at them and no one else. The strange thing is, during the process of trying to escape the room, both Sharon and Phyllis cannot help but face their past full of conflicts and unhealed wounds. Both Sharon and Phyllis have their own reasons for hating each other. Phyllis always feels that Sharon is an untrustworthy woman, while Sharon has also been hurt by Phyllis's actions and words many times. However, when faced with death and danger, these conflicts gradually become unimportant. Instead, they realize that in order to survive, they must cooperate, and to do that, they need to forgive each other. The escape was not easy, but when Sharon and Phyllis finally succeeded, they realized something miraculous: their relationship could change. Although not completely friends, the reconciliation between Sharon and Phyllis was something no one expected, even their loved ones. The fact that the two could reconcile in this dangerous time was a miracle, a change that could affect the future of all of them. When Sharon and Phyllis were finally rescued, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. However, Nick was still lying there, exhausted and seriously injured. The timely appearance of Victor, who came to his son as soon as he noticed Nick was seriously injured, was a crucial salvation. Although Victor was still worried about Nick's decision, he couldn't help but be proud of his son when he saw that Nick never gave up in this fight. Victor, a father who has always protected his son, finally realizes that sometimes, his son's love and determination can overcome everything. Although Nick took unnecessary risks, his love for Sharon and Phyllis overcame all obstacles. Nick's survival and safe return is not only a miracle for the Newman family, but also a sign of a change in the relationship between family members. Ultimately, this story is not only a dramatic rescue but also a turning point in the relationship between Phyllis and Sharon. The two have gone from enemies to people who can see each other in a different light. Their feud is over, and although not completely friendly, this reconciliation is a good sign for the future.